You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, world, and welcome to Tales from Hollywoodland, a veritable feast of movies, television, Broadway, showbiz stories, and even a little bit of news and gossip with Julian Schlossberg, Arthur E. Friedman, Stephen J. Rubin, and hey, I'm your producer, Faber, Mike Faber. Today, we're looking at Sean Connery, actor extraordinaire. And now, here's Steve.
Thank you, Johnny. Or is that Ed? Yo, such an appropriate day. I know that those of you who are listening are not listening on the day we're recording this, but today would have been Sean Connery's 95th birthday. He was born on August 25th, 1930. 1930 was a good year for action stars. Also the birth year of Steve McQueen. Also the birth year of Clint Eastwood, who's still going strong. It just goes to show you can't keep a good man down. But Sean Connery was a very important actor in my movie-going life, and I have to say I'm delighted that we're talking about this.
Well, he certainly came on with having paid his dues. This was not an overnight sensation. This was a man who started out with a very thick Scottish brogue, half Irish, half Scottish, and was a milk delivery boy in Edinburgh. And his dad was a factory worker. His mom was a house cleaner. It was real blue-collar stuff. And the idea, he left school young, and he ended up being a cement mixer, a lifeguard, a bodybuilder, a model, and finally got into acting.
He was in the chorus of South Pacific, one of those guys singing Bloody Mary is the Girl I Love.
In the movie?
The original stage musical in London. And Julian's right. He paid his dues. I was looking at his credits. He did some episodic television. After he became a movie guy, he never did television again. But back in his early days, I guess they call it those salad days, he would do television, did a lot of theater, actually filmed theater in London. Just a working guy from a very working background. Big man. I think Sean was 6'4", over 200, and rightly so. He became a bodybuilder for a time and competed in international bodybuilding tournaments.
Not long ago, we spoke of the game played in Hollywood from time to time called actor or movie star or both. There are those who are movie stars and really aren't good actors. There are those that are very good actors and are not what you call box office movie stars. Sean Connery would be one of those guys who was both. He was a movie star and he was a great actor and he was box office. So he had it all.
He elevated every project he was ever involved in. I mean, you get Sean Connery in your movie, you are doing really well. And I know that he was very picky. Early on, I think the first time I ever saw him, I was probably 8. And I went to the movies to see a Disney film called Darby O'Gill and the Little People, which was one of those terrific Disney fantasy movies about leprechauns in Ireland and strange creatures. I think that scared me a little bit. But there is a sequence where Sean Connery plays a character who has to use his fists. And I guess watching that movie that day was the wife of Albert R. Broccoli, who was about to produce the first James Bond movie, Dr. No. And they were launching an international search to find their James Bond. This, in the history of Hollywood, there's probably been very few movies that have searched so long to find their 007. And simultaneously, while Dana Broccoli was seeing Darby O'Gill in The Little People, Harry Saltzman, who was Albert R. Broccoli's partner, saw a movie called On the Fiddle, which was a British film that was kind of the British Abbott and Costello type comedy. And I believe Sean was starring opposite an actor named Alfie Lynch. And it came to Harry's attention. So they invited Sean Connery into their offices at Audley Square in London, and talk about magnetic presences. Broccoli, for years afterward, was talking about the first time he walked into the office. They said he moved like a cat. And he was not exactly the idea that Ian Fleming had in his mind when he pictured James Bond. If you've read the novels, James Bond is a bit of an upper-class snob who happens to be a terrific secret agent. He knows the right wines, he drives the right cars, he has all the accoutrements of being a well-dressed secret agent. Although I don't know, as a secret agent, I don't know how well-dressed you can be, because aren't you supposed to be secret, Julian, don't you think?
Well, he knew how to wear a tuxedo, that's for sure.
Yes.
And the story went, when I had Broccoli on my show, he said that they wanted him, he being Connery, to do a screen test. And he refused. He said, I'm not doing a screen test. I've been in movies. I'm not doing it. He supposedly banged the desk, got up, walked out, and they said, this guy's amazing. And they looked out the window, supposedly, and exactly what you said, Steve. They said he walked to his car with cat-like movements. And that was how he got the job. So it's an interesting story. Whether it's apocryphal or not, it doesn't matter. It sounds good.
Well, though, in the annals of a great casting for movies, the history of it all, every now and then you come up with a Marlon Brando in The Godfather, or Al Pacino in The Godfather, which everybody fought. But every now and then you come up with something that's perfect. And when they came up with Sean Connery for James Bond, they hit the ball out of the park.
Well, the reaction at first from the U.S. Exhibitors, I heard that they were referring to Sean as that limey truck driver.
Yeah.
So they weren't too impressed with Sean until they probably saw Dr. No, just like I wasn't too impressed when Daniel Craig was hired to play Bond until I saw Casino Royale. I mean, Dr. No, which was released in the United States with not a lot of fanfare, not like the later movies like Goldfinger and Thunderball, which were big releases. I mean, the movie was released, I didn't even know about it, and I loved going to the movies every week, but it was big. It opened all over LA, and Jerry Pam, who was a prominent publicist in LA, told me that when he called the theater opening night to find out what was playing, they told him, "Sean Connery in Dr. Number."
Well,
I love it.
Whatever.
Well, I think the guy who really should get some credit is the director, Terrence Young. Because Terrence Young did direct the first Bond and the second one as well, and later, I think, Thunderball. But most importantly, he took Connery around. Terrence Young, was a sophisticated man. He was a writer for the theater, a director for the theater, and he took Connery around to show him how things got done in a sophisticated way. Because after all, a guy coming from a blue-collar background has to be able to do what Bond had to do. And boy, between Connery himself and Terrence Young, they created an incredible character who, as it turned out, Sean Connery started to loathe because he was so typecast. And everyone wanted to talk to him, be with him, and he had it. He said an interesting thing on an interview I saw. He said, the fame is tough enough. He says, and they were comparing me with the Beatles, but the difference was there was 4 of them, and there was only 1 of me.
Yeah, but he wore a kilt.
He said, so I had to get it all, and he was not happy about it.
Julian, it's good that you mentioned Terrence Young, because Terrence Young, in his own way, was a bit of a dashing figure. Terrence Young during World War II commanded a tank in the Guards Armor Division, and he fought in Operation Market Garden. He worked for a very, very tough commander, and he brought some of that panache and dash to Connery. But it's funny because if you think about it, the very first scene that anybody ever saw of Sean Connery as James Bond is he's sitting at the Baccarat table or chemin de fer, and someone's got to explain to me someday the difference between chemin de fer and Baccarat. But he is introduced. Terrence Young decided to follow the way Paul Mooney was introduced in the movie Juarez years before, where he is back to camera. You don't see him at first. And the beautiful girl across from him suddenly says, I admire your good luck, mister. And then a camera flashes around, and then it's Bond, James Bond. He's lighting a cigarette. It's a very dynamic introduction to an actor, because as neophytes, we didn't know who Bond was. I mean, for all we know is the guy walking into the club looking for him. We didn't know who he was. But Connery was just perfect. And if you watch Dr. No today, I mean, Dr. No was released in 1963 in the US. It cost $1 million. I think the last James Bond movie, No Time to Die, just in perspective, cost $300 million, which of course is what we're dealing with these days. But $1 million, I think Sean got about 25 grand, somewhere in that range. So not a lot of money.
Steve, what is, in your opinion, what are the three best movies Connery did that were not Bond?
Oh, well, that's a whole different story, Arthur. I made a list of movies we need to talk about today, but let's finish talking about Bond and then we'll get to them. Because I think there's, I mean, certainly you got to put The Hunt for Red October obviously has to be on that list. It's one of my favorites. The Man Who Would Be King, The Untouchables, for which he won his Oscar for Best Supporting Actor.
He was great in that. And not that he was great, wasn't he in Bridge Too Far?
Yes,
he was.
Yes, he was in A Bridge Too Far, absolutely. Ironically, the same year that Dr. No was released or produced, he was in The Longest Day. He played a soldier who lands on one of the British beaches, and in the same movie, right down the beach, riding a horse, is Gert Frobe, who portrayed Goldfinger. But I thought you were actually, Arthur, I thought you were going to ask me what were the first best Bonds. I think his first four were his best. Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball. The fifth one he only had twice. Interestingly, if you look at it, and this is just one of my little observations, having written about Bond so much, the first five James Bond movies were released alphabetically.
Well, one of the things that I always found interesting was that he teamed up with Sidney Lumet, a great American director, and they did 5 movies together, which is considerable. I mean, every once in a while, we know John Wayne and John Ford did 15, 16 movies together, but even 5, he did The Hill, he did The Offense, he did Anderson Tapes, he did Family Business and Murder on the Orient Express, all with Sidney. And he said, Connery did, that Sidney treated him like a serious actor, and that's what he wanted to be treated like, because he took his acting seriously. He gave an interview right after, I think, both Dr. No and Russia with Love, and he said, I want to work with Hitchcock. I want to work with Hitchcock. Hitchcock found out about it and sent him, no, he didn't send him the script. Hitchcock was used to, if Hitchcock wanted you, you said yes. I mean, you just didn't say no. And he said, I want to read the script. And they were surprised and I guess some outraged, but he wanted to wanted to know that he wasn't going to play a James Bond character if he did the movie. And
he didn't. He played an American businessman in Marnie. And I think you're absolutely right. I think having done Hitchcock, he was becoming more and more dissatisfied with the Bonds. Not only did he feel he was being underpaid, considering how they blew up with Goldfinger and Thunderball, but the schedules. He would have to work for 6 months on a Bond movie with all the post-production, all the looping, etc. and it didn't give him a lot of room to play other roles, although he did them. He did, I think he did a Western with Brigitte Bardot called Shallow. He did Marnie, as we mentioned. He did a movie with Gina Lollobrigida. Of course, every star in Hollywood was doing a movie with Gina Lollobrigida. He did Woman of Straw. And
Not only that, Steve, every star in Hollywood was doing Gina Lollobrigida.
Molly Maguire's. He did the Molly Maguire.
Molly Maguire's about that group. They were like urban terrorists in Ireland. That was Ireland, right, Julian?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And then he just, as you watch the Bond movies through Thunderball, they're all terrific. But when he gets to You Only Live Twice, which was filmed in Japan, he's starting to look bored. And I think that the Bond movies just had worn out their welcome for him. He even said that when he was filming in Tokyo, like you said earlier, the press interest in him was so extreme they would follow him into the bathroom. And that was the last straw for Sean Connery. Ironically, he ends his involvement in the series in '67, and then they brought in George Lazenby to play James Bond, and his Bond did not do as well. So Dave from United Artists went to Scotland to interest Sean in coming back, and he offered to back two of Sean's personal film projects and give him a big salary. And he comes back in '71 to do Diamonds Are Forever, looking a little bit fuller. I mean, he wasn't the lean Bond of Goldfinger. And then 12 years after Diamonds Are Forever, Jack Schwartzman lures him back in the remake of Thunderball, which was called Never Say Never Again, with Maria Brandauer and Barbara Carrera. Just an okay Bond, not a great Bond.
Diamonds Are Forever was Shirley Bassey, correct?
Correct.
Who was the next picture you mentioned? Who sang that?
Are you talking about Never Say Never Again?
Yes.
It was Lanny Hall. She was, I believe, married to
Al Alpert.
Thank you. Herb Alpert's wife, Lanny Hall. Very good.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's finished with Bond, and then he starts to just do some amazing movies. I mean, coming out of Bond, Sean Connery is probably one of the most requested actors in Hollywood. I do want to say one thing about his early career pre-Bond, because I mentioned Darby O'Gill and the Little People. There is a terrific Tarzan movie called Tarzan's Greatest Adventure. And if you ever check this out, Anthony Quayle stars in it. Niall McGuinness is in it. It's a true adventure movie. This is one of the Gordon Scott Tarzans. And I think those are the best Tarzans for the modern era. And Sean has a small part as one of the henchmen in a gang. And it's very early Connery, so I didn't want to touch upon that. But the movies he made post-Bond, as I mentioned earlier, are big time. One of the first I'd like to mention is the one he did for John Milius. It's called The Wind and the Lion. And the thing about Sean, which I thought was interesting, is he could play characters like an Arab chieftain and make you totally believe he's an Arab chieftain. I mean, in this case, he's playing the head of a bandit tribe in Tripoli on the coast of Libya, part of the Barbary pirates. And it's one of my favorite roles of his. You guys know the movie, right?
Oh, yes. Candy Bergen.
Candy Bergen.
This is his co-star, yeah.
And Brian Keith as Teddy Roosevelt.
That's right. That's right.
Was he in Khartoum?
He was not.
He
was not. That was Richard Johnson, Charlton Heston, and Laurence Olivier. Another one of my favorites, Arthur. We'll talk about that movie sometime.
One of your SEAN stories. My calling a driving owner in Maine to set up Khartoum, and the guy said, "I got all the cartoons I need. You sold me the Pink Panthers." I said, No, it's Khartoum. I don't care what you say. They're all cartoons.
It's interesting you should mention that
movie.
When they opened the movie at the Cinerama Dome in LA, they changed the title to The Battle for Khartoum, probably for that very reason.
Yeah.
It's like one of you were talking about, what's the name of the movie, the Buñuel movie, where it's on summer vacation or something and nobody showed up?
No, that was not Buñuel. It was De Sica. Brief Vacation. and no one came to the theater because they saw the marquee, and that was that. But the thing about Connery that I found interesting was the fact that he decided to walk away from everything. And unlike even James Cagney, who was lured back, he really did walk away. He did. He left Hollywood, he left London, and he ended up in the Bahamas for many years, painting, reading, and enjoying his life.
He also had a very happy marriage to a French lady named Micheline, and I think she brought him a great deal of stability over the years. Although when he first started the Bonds, he was married to an actress named Diane Cilento, a very
Lovely
beautiful
actress.
Tom Jones.
From Tom Jones, exactly.
And she was in Hombre with Paul Newman, had a big role in that. And he had a son with her, Jason, the actor Jason Connery.
Jason Connery, who played Robin Hood on television, definitely. Another one of his more well-known movies is The Man Who Would Be King, where he got to star opposite a good friend of his, Michael Caine. And this is a John Huston movie with a legendary history behind it. It took forever to get made, and a lot of fun. Again, some actors don't do as well in period costume. Connery was not one of those actors. He looks good in uniforms, in Arab dress.
Even as an old Robin Hood in Robin and Marion.
Even as an old Robin Hood in Robin and Marion. And then Arthur mentioned A Bridge Too Far. He has a terrific role because he plays a general with the 1st Paratroop regiment or division. They land near the Arnhem Bridge thinking they're going to be totally supported, but their radios aren't working and they can't call for support. And all of a sudden, whereas the intelligence department told them there would be very few Germans around, they find out they've landed in the midst of a training ground for a whole German SS Panzer division. So it's seeing the frustration on his face, especially when he's walking towards the battlefield and they pass an insane asylum and everybody's laughing at him. And he turns to one of his subordinates and says, "Do you think they're telling us something?" Connery was great in that movie, and that's one of my favorites. And he could play an old man with a terrific amount of grace and humor. And when he teams up with Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I'm sure that's one of Mike's favorites.
It's one of my favorites, of course. But also, there's so many great films that he did. I'm looking at a movie like Outlander, I think it was.
Outlander. He played a sheriff in outer space.
Yep, which was wonderful. And he was great in that film. But also, I loved when he was with Nicolas Cage in The Rock. And, it was interesting because rumor going around, he was Bond in that one, but an older retired Bond. So
it's hard to believe that IMDb lists 96 roles that he had. 96. Really hard to believe he did that many. So he was able to get out of the Bond image, but I don't think anyone ever thought of him as really anything more than Bond as far as the public was concerned. But a lot of directors and actors wanted to work with him. F. Murray Abraham did a couple of movies with him, loved working with him. They did Name of the Rose and Finding Forrester.
Yep. Finding Forrester, which is a terrific movie I recently watched for the first time. If you're looking for a really interesting, fun movie where he plays a professor, just so good. I have to tell you a funny story. It was told to me by John Schwartzman, who's become a prominent director of photography, worked a lot on the Michael Bay films. He did The Rock with Sean and Nicholas, and they went out to dinner one night. And Sean, who's just doesn't hesitate to say what's on his mind, turns to Sean at one point and says, "Do it." And Sean looked at him rather quizzically. No, do it. You know what I mean. And Sean turned to him and said, "Bond, James Bond." It was just one of those moments. I'm sure thousands of times people have asked Sean Connery to to imitate that voice. And it's become such a cliche. In fact, Michael used it tonight at the beginning of our show. He introduced himself as Faber, Mike Faber. There you go.
There you go. I'm up there in the iconic status now, so it's pretty cool.
Well, he got into a lot of trouble in a Playboy interview, and then it was restated with Barbara Walters about the idea that sometimes you have no choice, if all else has failed, that you can hit a woman. Well, this was not the time to be doing that, and this really did cause him a lot of trouble. The one thing you have to say about Connery, he never apologized and he never retracted.
Yeah, I think that he was a man who marched to his own drummer in many ways. I was very happy when he got nominated and later won the Oscar for his role in The Untouchables, opposite Kevin Costner in that movie. I thought he was just terrific. He kind of, it's interesting. Tom Mankiewicz, who wrote a number of the Bond movies, he wrote Diamonds, and he did some of the Roger Moores, told me that the main difference between Sean Connery and Roger Moore as James Bond is that when Roger Moore went into a bar, it was what he would quip, what he would say to get what he wanted. But if Sean Connery walked into a bar, he would use his fists if he needed to. And he was a very, very big physical presence. And when Cubby Broccoli was searching for an actor to play James Bond, he told me in an interview that they wanted to find a two-fisted man, someone like a character out of a Mickey Spillane novel or Mike Hammer, somebody who was good with their fists. And Connery, having showed that fisticuffs from that very first movie, Darby O'Gill won the role for that.
Yeah, and he had joined, I think, at 17 years old, the Royal Navy. So he really did have a lot of the so-called macho credentials you need to play James Bond.
Exactly. He was kind of, in a way, kind of like the British John Wayne. I mean, if you wanted a strong, I should say Scottish, because he was Scottish, Irish, but if you wanted a physical presence, Connery was your guy. You didn't cast Sean Connery as a bank clerk.
Steve, when he did The Longest Day, his career was kind of nowhere. He was just almost cast as an extra. He wasn't really known at that time, was he?
Not really. The movies we've been talking about, his early movies, Darby O'Gill and Tarzan's Greatest Adventure. These were movies that they didn't get much attention at all. And certainly there were 42 actors in Longest Day. I grant you that 41 of them got more attention from the public than Sean Connery. We didn't know who he was, really. We really didn't know who he was. In fact, when he was cast as James Bond, in the States at least, they knew a little bit more about him over in England, but we didn't know too much about him.
Well, Arthur, you can confirm this, but my belief was that Dr. No from Russia with Love did okay, but it was Goldfinger that knocked it through the roof. And then you guys at United Artists put Dr. No from Russia with Love together, and then that went through the roof. But it took Goldfinger to really knock it out of the park. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. They both did well. Dr. No did well. Russia did a little better. And along came Goldfinger, and that was called a blockbuster in those days, albeit playing one large theater in downtown areas first before it went out wide. But boy, did that go crazy.
Yeah, they
released at Christmas, so it had a lot of Christmas action too.
24 hours a day they were running in some of the theaters.
The Mill Theater in New York, we ran it 24 hours a day.
There you go. Now, I had not seen the first two Bond movies. Like I said, they were open with very little fanfare. But Goldfinger, I had read the paperback because in my middle school classroom, everybody was reading James Bond paperbacks in '64. So the idea that a Bond movie was opening at Christmas, and of all the Bond movies to open, Goldfinger was probably the most spectacular in terms of just having so much production value and such interesting characters. I've always maintained that the best Bond movies are defined by their villains. If they've got a great villain, to match wits with Sean. And not only did you have the great villain of Gert Frobe's Goldfinger, but you also had Harold Sakata's Odd Job, which sets up that great battle royal in the vault of Fort Knox.
There was a sidebar with James with the Bond stuff, and that was President Kennedy, whose popularity was unbelievable, who read the books, and it became popularly known that he did, and that helped that along early on.
Oh, it was huge. It was a huge boost to sale of the books. Absolutely, Arthur.
Yes.
But Goldfinger was a huge success. And then it's funny, these days, it can take 5 years for a new Bond movie. In 1964, it took only a year before we got Thunderball. And Thunderball was even bigger in size than Goldfinger. And it was originally going to be the first James Bond movie, but Ian Fleming was caught up in a legal battle over the rights and lost them to Kevin McClory. So Kevin McClory, this Irish film producer, made a deal with Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, and they produced it together. And Thunderball was a big, big movie. We just celebrated its 60th anniversary. It's coming up. It's coming up this Christmas. It'll be 60 years that Thunderball was released. And Arthur, you were already there, so it was probably a big time for you.
It was a very big time. You know, our audience, although we've discussed this before, it's worth mentioning again. Today's world, any movie comes out, goes wide. That's been happening big time since Jaws, certainly since Star Wars. But in the days of Goldfinger and Dr. No and all that, Julian knows that, he lived it as I lived it. These pictures, however big they were, played one theater in downtown wherever. Downtown Chicago, downtown Detroit. That's how distribution worked in those days. So today, you can see, if it were released today, you'd see it in 4,000 theaters. In those days, you were seeing it in one theater in the big cities, the major leagues. So maybe like 50, there were 50 prints working on one of those huge Bond movies. Could you imagine from the standpoint of owning the theater, that downtown theater having that kind of exclusivity, that when you played downtown Boston as an example, all of these towns that surrounded Boston, people would have to come into the city to see the hot movie, and they did.
And they would play sometimes downtown for a year or more before it went into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I played Midnight Cowboy for 1 year at the Coronet Theater before it was released around the New York area. So that would happen. It would happen.
Yeah, well, in answer to your question, though, Steve, by the time Thunderball came, on the heels of Goldfinger, oh yes, it was totally established. So it was every bit as big, I think, bigger than Goldfinger.
It was. I think it did $52 million gross. In fact, the number of tickets, considering how much tickets cost in those days, it was like $1 or $2.
Yeah,
tops.
no, it was more than that. But the admission, the numbers of the admits, the people who come to buy those tickets were huge. Huge. Were huge. Now I have to tell you something. In 1967, what was the Bond that came out? The first Bond in the summertime.
That was called You Only Live Twice.
You Only Live Twice. So I remember going in months in advance. All the theater owners were so crazy. Oh my God, it's going to play drive-ins in the East, the Northeast, Midwest. Can you imagine James Bond and all these blah, 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 blah. But it was the hottest thing in the world until it opened. It was never as big as everyone thought. It was still big. But the movie that took the whole thing was Dirty Dozen that summer.
Well, I'll tell you what happened also. Charlie Feldman, who was an agent turned producer, had acquired the rights to Casino Royale and couldn't get Connery because Connery was under contract to Broccoli and Saltzman. So they decided to make it as a big spoof of the world of James Bond with Woody Allen and Peter Sellers and Orson Welles. And that movie beat You Only Live Twice to the box office. I believe it was released in the spring. And Cubby told me that a lot of people thought Casino Royale was the official Bond movie that year. So it did dilute a little bit of You Only Live Twice's gross. So the numbers went down a little bit from Thunderball.
But I think that Casino Royale was 65.
No, 67.
67? Really?
67.
You sure of that?
Yeah, the same year as You Only Live Twice, because of the experience of having to battle a second Bond. When 1983 comes along and the official Roger Moore Bond movie was Octopussy that year, Cubby had the same battle with Jack Schwartzman, who was bringing out the Thunderball remake, Never Say Never Again. So he fought in the courts to prevent Jack from releasing that movie, and Jack won, and both films did pretty well that year. So the experience of having to deal with Casino Royale back in '67 really upset Cubby very much. It's funny, when Never Say Never Again came out in '83, I had published a new book, the second edition of my book, The James Bond Films: A Behind the Scenes History. So as a little promotional item, I gave the LA Herald Examiner five trivia questions. So I turned on Johnny Carson that night, and Johnny Carson has Sean Connery on the show. And Johnny Carson is asking Sean Connery my trivia questions. And one of the questions I said, name the only James Bond movie where he sings. And it's from Dr. No. He sings Underneath the Mango Tree. And Sean got that. I think he even sang a little bit of Underneath the Mango Tree. I never got to meet Sean, but I certainly had a little connection there.
Well, you should have gotten some payment.
Oh boy!
Considering there were so many sequels to the Bonds, Steve, we're all surprised you didn't work on one of those sequels, considering your closeness to sequels.
Well, I won't get into my relationship with Albert R. Broccoli. Let's just say it started out on a very high note, and then it got down to a very low note. So I was persona non grata there for a while. But I actually have a decent relationship with Barbara Broccoli, who has now recently surrendered the creative reins along with her stepbrother, Michael. Amazon now calls the creative future. And of course, everybody wants to know who's going to be the new James Bond, and nobody really knows yet. And now but there's no script yet. I think we're probably not going to see a new James Bond movie before next Christmas, 26. I don't know. These movies take literally years to prepare and shoot, and we're not going to get a Bond anytime soon, which is unfortunate.
You know what would have been a great Bond? I think his name was Edward Fox, the guy who was in Day of the Jackal.
I know who he is, certainly.
He was a perfect guy for Bond.
He actually plays the head of the tank corps that I mentioned earlier, that Terrence Young was a tanker, and I couldn't remember his boss's name. His boss's name was Joe Vandeler, and Edward Fox plays Joe Vandeler in A Bridge Too Far. So, he would have been interesting.
Not as tall as he should be.
No.
You know, having nothing to do with, I'm sorry, guys, but Julian earlier mentioned Sidney
Lumet.
Sidney Lumet. And I took a look last night. I saw the half of one of the great little movies of all time. And I love it. I loved it as they call Fail Safe. What a movie that was. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but mentioning Sidney Lumet. I wasn't aware Sidney Lumet directed it. And
it was
a great movie.
Great movie. Released the same year as Dr. Strangelove, and they're very similar in certain ways.
Well, they held it back for a year.
Yeah. It was the dark side of the story. I mean, Dr. Strangelove is kind of a bit of a dark comedy, whereas Failsafe is totally straight. Yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, do you know who the tallest James Bond was?
Lazenby?
No, it wasn't Lazenby. It wasn't Connery. Timothy Dalton actually is taller than any of them.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, he's definitely tall. Although I think Timothy Dalton's a terrific actor, but to me, he wasn't James Bond. He was a little too serious. But that was the way they
I guess box office wise, the biggest movie that Connery ever did, I'm going to guess here, strong guess, was The Untouchables.
I'd be curious about that. We can look it up.
Actually, it was probably Indiana Jones.
Yeah, or the Hunt for Red October was very, very big. I mean, the Hunt for Red October. By the way, that role, we talked about him playing an Arab chieftain in The Wind and the Lion, but to play a Russian so perfectly in The Hunt for Red October, it's really a really terrific movie. Usually, if it's on one of the channels, I stop off and I visit it for a little bit.
But it's interesting that Arthur brought up the idea that you're a movie star or you're an actor, and this man was clearly both.
Yeah.
That is unusual. It really is an unusual thing that you don't find it often. Connery was involved with a wonderful charity in Scotland where he helped educational kids, help kids in education, help them get scholarships. He was very he gave back. It was one of the reasons he did Never Say Never Again, I believe, Steve. I think they agreed to give a lot of money towards this charity that he wanted to set up.
He's always been very good for. Now, here's something interesting. The Untouchables, the Brian De Palma film you were mentioning, the one that won the Oscar for him, the worldwide gross of The Untouchables, according to IMDb Pro, only 76 million. So I'm very surprised that did.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, if I looked up
Really?
Indiana Jones now, it probably did a couple hundred, I would think. But
Are we saying the worldwide gross? Are you including domestic?
yeah, gross world 76 million. I mean,
Sounds impossible.
it does seem impossible.
Yeah.
Now, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which we talked about, where he plays Indiana Jones's father, that worldwide gross, drum roll please, $474 million.
Oh.
So, I mean, that's Indiana Jones. We know they're going to do business. Now I'm going to look up The Hunt for Red October. And,
I'm curious on that one.
Yeah. Okay, so The Hunt for Red October, which was released in 1990, 201 million worldwide.
Yeah.
So you were right, Arthur. Indiana Jones trumps them all because that's the big Spielberg. That's that factory.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big epic numbers. But by that time, Indiana Jones was 82 or something like that. But that particular Indiana Jones. But by the time Hunt for Red October comes around, 1990, you're seeing the explosion on the foreign markets, and that's one of those perfect movies for foreign markets.
So with all the people trooping through United Artists, actually not United Artists, Columbia, when you were a page there, did you ever see Sean Connery?
No, and it would have been early. He wasn't around to my knowledge at that time.
Okay, yeah, because
No.
you were there.
So Jack Lemmon, I mean, so all of Judy Holliday, all those Columbia players, Kim Novak was there a lot. She was fantastic looking. Kim Novak was a movie star.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of actresses who were making a big play, one of them started opposite Sean Connery in a movie called Entrapment, which was Catherine Zeta-Jones. And they made an interesting couple in that movie. It's funny how if you look at Sean Connery's filmography, even though he has dalliances with a lot of women, he's not doing a lot of romantic films and almost no comedies. He did do a film back in the 60s.
Madness.
A Fine Madness was one, which, Julian, you'll have to help me because I never saw the movie.
Oh, it's a fun movie, actually. Gene Seberg is in it, yeah.
Oh, I love Gene Seberg.
Yeah.
Talk about a troubled soul.
But a beautiful troubled soul.
A beautiful troubled soul.
Stephen, do you do an impression of Connery?
No, unfortunately, I wouldn't embarrass myself by doing that. But Mike, you do a pretty good one, don't you?
Let's hear it.
No, Mr. Bond,
I
I do more of his villains more than I do Connery, because Connery is, Scottish it's tough sometimes, but I think if you're Scottish, I think it's required that you do that to graduate high school.
Yeah, I'll do Connery on the laser table, about to getting my privates roasted, and you do Goldfinger. Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
That's the best Gert Frobe of all time.
Well, thank Richard Maybaum for those lines, and thank them for getting rid of the original buzzsaw in the novel and replacing it with a more modern industrial laser. And I
Couldn't the Connery thing something like he would take the word yes and it was yes.
Yes. Yes.
S-H.
Hello, Money Penny.
But he knows what I know. You know nothing, Mr. Bond. Operation Grand Slam, for instance. 2 words that can mean nothing to you nor your organization. Can you afford to take that chance? You are right, Mr. Bond. You are worth more to me alive.
Very good, guys.
Oh, God, it's just so memorable. Those were the days when great dialogue was spinning off the pen of Richard Maybaum. I think that in many ways, those days are long gone. Now it's just action, 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 action. But those were days when they were just changing the way movies were made. And Connery was right in the thick of it.
I think when you throw a live fan into a bathtub and electrocute someone and then turn to the camera and say, shocking.
Positively shocking.
Please look at my wife. She's quite dead.
Yes, well, that was something. In fact, Ian Fleming walked up to Richard Maybaum before he passed away and said, I didn't realize that my stories could be so funny. And it was true that Maybaum gave Connery these, what they call throwaway lines. And, the first one I heard was in Dr. No, when the hearse that's chasing him with the bad guys goes over the cliff and a construction worker comes running over and says, "How did it happen?" And Connery turns to them and says, "I think they were on their way to a funeral." And it's that kind of stuff was great. And then when he shoots Vargas on the beach and Thunderball, he says, "What?" And with a spear gun, he says, "I think he got the point." It's just good stuff. I miss him. I miss Sean. I think that Hollywood misses Sean Connery. We don't produce movie stars like we used to.
Steve, you were a young guy at the outset of the Bonds. Dr. No, how old were you? Teenager?
12.
12. So that it captured you then.
Well, it started with my father coming home from a business trip and throwing a paperback on my desk. He would usually ask me if I wanted to read Westerns. For some reason, he loved reading Westerns. I had no interest in reading Westerns. There were like 12,000 Western shows on TV. I didn't need to read about them. But he threw the cover of Goldfinger had this naked woman covering her private parts, and all in gold. And I said, "What's that, Dad?" And for a 12-year-old to read Goldfinger and start discovering things like magnificent breasts, I mean, that's how Ian Fleming always described the women. And I said, it's like a new language to me. And then when you saw Goldfinger and you saw these women in 3 dimensions, it was an awakening on many levels.
So you saw Dr. No and Russia after you saw Goldfinger?
Village Theater, Westwood.
Yeah.
Double feature. After we had been blown away by Goldfinger, I went to see Dr. No and For Much Love. It was like overwhelming. Oh my God, this is so cool.
What a double feature, huh?
What a double feature. Maybe the successful double feature ever released, because everybody went to see it. And I just had a delightful time, and I got more and more interested in Bond. And I discovered in the mid-70s that no one had written a book about the making of the Bonds. And that's when I looked up Cubby Broccoli, and I got an appointment with him on the lot at Sony, and it was called MGM in those days. And I spent an hour and a half interviewing Albert R. Broccoli, and he introduced me to Michael Wilson. I went to London that summer, and I did all of my research.
And the reason he interviewed with you is because you were saying you were going to do the history of the James Bond movies,
and I had written combat films, American Realism, 1945 and 1970. So I had a book behind me, and he saw me as a real historian as opposed to somebody who was just trying to make a quick buck off the Bonds.
Right.
And the book came out in 81 and did very well.
Has it been selling ever since then?
Well, I've had the first two editions were published in the 80s, and then in 90, I was approached by a company to do a formal encyclopedia, which became the complete James Bond movie encyclopedia. And I've done 4 editions of that. The last, which includes No Time to Die, was released about 3 years ago.
Well, I'm talking about the first book you wrote.
The first book was just did 2 editions, 81 and 83, and then I moved on.
But you may have moved on, but today, given Amazon and all of the places you can buy books, has the book continued to sell?
Well, you can buy it on Amazon. It's probably a hefty price now because it's 40 years old. It's funny, sometimes books will pop up with my signature from 40 years ago, and it's being sold as a used book.
Yeah. Do you get reports on how much business it's done, Steve?
I've probably sold over the course of time, maybe 80, 90,000 copies of all the books. It's not, movie books are no longer as popular because of the internet. If you want to learn all about the films of Gene Kelly, you can go on the internet and learn all about the films of Gene Kelly. And there are all these photographs. I think it's harder now to sell a book. I did a book called The Twilight Zone Encyclopedia based on the TV series, the Rod Serling series. That sold more copies than my James Bond encyclopedia because there's a lot of James Bond books have been done since.
But again, there too, in the Twilight Zone, has it continued to sell through the years?
Oh yeah. Because the Twilight Zone, the original black and white series, is still one of the most popular.
Amazing.
Series.
Yeah. Yes. Everybody smoked. Well, we see them, we see them on TV from now and then. By the way, they stand up, they're great.
Oh no, they haven't dimmed. I write in my books when I sign them, I say the sun never sets on the Twilights. By the way, let's talk a little bit about movies we've all seen recently. I just want to report that I watched one of the most boring movies ever, and with one of the most beautiful women ever. I watched a movie called Pandora and the Flying Dutchman from 1951 with
Ava
Gardner and James Mason. 2 hours of pure dullness.
Well, I watched a terrific Alfred Hitchcock movie, one of my favorites. It was Strangers on a Train. It is just so superior to anything I see these days. And it's just great. You just watch great performances, fine writing, unbelievable direction, a movie that just stands up after all these many, many years. Terrific film.
I just had I just did a podcast with the author of the book on the making of The Strangers on a Train. It's a very interesting story. Talk about a actor going against type, Robert Walker as Bruno.
Yeah, but he was great. Boy, was he scary.
But a troubled man. His wife had just been basically stolen by Selznick. So his marriage ended, and I don't know how he got through that movie, but he is so brilliant in that movie.
He is. Bruno Anthony. Look out.
Bruno.
And I have to say that really a big element of that movie, as you'll agree, Julian, is Dmitri Tiomkin's music.
Oh, yes.
Just great.
I sure do agree. And it's interesting, too. I'm sure the book did not have Guy Farley Granger, a tennis player. I'll bet anything on it.
He was an architect.
There you go. And you know why? Because Farley was a good tennis player. Huh. He lived with Arthur Lawrence. They were lovers, and they often played on the weekends with Charlie Chaplin. So it's interesting that they put that tennis, not the architect, but the tennis in.
And the guy who plays him in that big match, Fred Reynolds, the character Fred Reynolds, was his tennis coach in the movie. So that was very interesting. Well, I think it's time to hand it over to Mike. Are we ready, Mike, to hear some pearls from you?
Of course. You didn't ask me what movie I had seen recently, my friend.
You didn't ask me either. It's okay.
No, Steve.
I forgive you.
I apologize.
He just had Sean Connery on his brain.
I've got Sean Connery on the brain. What was the last movie you saw, Mike?
We actually yesterday went to go to a re-release to celebrate the anniversary of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, the
And
Coen
it
Brothers.
was, yes, and it was wonderful. The film was sold out at in 2 in the afternoon, and it was great seeing it. The energy, the film itself just flies by. The music by T-Bone Burnett was just amazing. And it was just a great film to revisit. And it's just one of my favorites, music wise, acting wise. And yes, folks, George Clooney does not sing in this film. So it is awesome.
And Mr. Friedman, what was the last movie you and Barbara watched?
Well, I said I watched the second half of the Sidney Lumet movie last night, Fail Safe. And following it, I decided to watch something for 10 minutes that was directed, again, I didn't know that, by Franklin Schaffner, called The Best Man. And I wound up watching the whole movie. A terrific movie. The Best
it's
Man,
a great
Henry
movie.
Fonda.
Gore Vidal wrote that. It was originally a play and then made into a movie.
And he's in it.
In the play?
Yep. He's in the movie for about 2 seconds.
Merwin's a nobody.
Right.
But maybe now he's a somebody.
That's right. Yeah. Hell of a movie. And you know what? It's incredible. That was 1964. And the things about that movie that are today are almost exactly the same.
Yeah. No, it's true.
And the Fonda character was supposed to be based on Adlai Stevenson. And the Lee Tracy character was supposed to be Harry Truman.
Yes.
They had
Gore. Lee Tracy was phenomenal.
Yeah, Gore knew what he was doing because his whole family was from politics. His grandfather was a senator. So he grew up in Washington, D.C. and knew all about politics. So as you say, Arthur, 61 years later or so, it's still applicable.
It's still applicable. So Mr. Smith goes to Washington in 1939. You know what's great in this movie? Shelley Berman in Best Man. Everybody's great in it. It's a great movie.
Mike, we turn it over to you.
Fantastic, my friends. You've reached the end of this episode of the Tales from Hollywoodland podcast. Always remember, we couldn't do this without you. We want to hear from you, so please write us anytime at talesfromhollywoodland@gmail.com. Remember, you could also find us wherever fine podcasts are found. And now you can even find us up on YouTube. If you made it this far into the episode, why not subscribe and give us a thumbs up? Or if you're listening to us, give us 5 stars. Why not? It's almost September, folks. Feel pity for us. It's a good thing. If you're on social media, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Before we get out of here, let's check with the guys and see what's happening this week on their podcast. Julian, who are you talking to this week?
Well, we have a 2-parter. It's obviously the first part will be Jeff Garlin, who played the manager and agent of Larry David on Curb Your Enthusiasm for the entire series and was one of the executive producers and talks about how they cast and how they did the shows. And then he also starred for 9 years on a show called The Goldbergs on ABC that ran for 9 years, where his father was portrayed by Judd Hirsch. His father-in-law was George Siegel. And so he talks very candidly about the fact that he's bipolar. He talks about the fact that he's has ADD. He's a very, very honest and interesting man to talk to.
Very much so. Very, very much so. Steve, what's going on Saturday night at the movies?
Well, this year is the 50th anniversary of the release of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And to honor that anniversary, I had the gentleman Brad Dourif, who played Billy Bibbit, opposite Jack Nicholson's Oscar-winning role. Brad was nominated that year for a picture that won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay. And Brad's great. He talks also a little bit about playing Grima Wormtongue in the Lord of the Rings movies. So we had a lot of fun with Brad. And Brad's daughter, by the way, Fiona, is now one of the stars of the Apple series, The Pit. and she's delightful. She's the nurse wearing the ankle bracelet.
Well, there you go. That is awesome. Now we'll look out for her when we see her and say, wait a minute, we know who she is and who her father is. That's pretty awesome. Arthur, what's coming up next week on our podcast?
We're going to be doing a whole episode on great Hollywood families. The Barrymores, the Bridges, Jeff, his brother, and father, Lloyd. There's a lot of great Hollywood families that have been through Hollywood movies and TV for many, many years now.
On behalf of Steve, Arthur, and Julian, thanks again for listening. This is your producer and announcer, Mike Faber. We will see you here next time on Tales from Hollywoodland. Your Hollywood adventure starts right here. Calling all Whovians, dive into the time vortex with Earth Station Who, the podcast that celebrates the legacy, present, and future of Doctor Who.
From classic adventures with the First Doctor to thrilling stories of the 15th, we've got it all covered.
For lively discussions, geeky debates, the Whovian Geek Seat, and a whole lot of TARDIS talk.
On Z to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to Earth Station Who, where every episode is a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey good time.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.